All right, good morning, everybody. It's go time, so find your seats. All right. Welcome, everybody. Good to see a good crowd again at the first Elevate Rapid City Cracker Barrel for the 2024 session. These always are a lot of fun. Appreciate the legislators coming out and sharing what they know and their ideas and responding to the constituents out there. But my name is Brad Sadoff with Black Hills Works. Proud to help moderate today's Cracker Barrel. We've coordinated live stream and remote question submission options for the Cracker Barrel this year. You can find a link for the live stream on elevaterapidcity.com or on their Facebook page. A reminder for the legislators, because we're live streaming to a remote audience, please remember to speak into the microphone. To set our guidelines for today's question and answer format, we ask in-person attendees to submit their questions on the form provided. You can get this form from one of our staff members standing around in the room or at the back next to the coffee table. We've got some up here on the front table also. These written questions allow the moderator to group similar questions so we can address more topics. You will see on the form that we ask for your name. This is optional, however. When possible, we like to announce who is asking the question, though. We remind you to please write legibly. If possible, please include the specific bill number. This helps legislators to better understand your concerns and respond accordingly. Only note cards with respectful questions will be read. To ensure we're able to cover as many audience questions as we can, we're asking that a maximum of 4 legislators address each question and that they keep their response to 2 minutes. We'd like to remind legislators and audience members that this is not a debate. This is an opportunity to hear from and respond to constituents. So, before we begin, we'd like to thank Western Dakota Tech and their team for their use of this great event. It's a wonderful facility for the Cracker Barrels each year. I want to invite Dr. Ann Bowman, president of Western Dakota Technical College, to come up and say a few words and welcome folks.
Good morning. All right. Welcome to Western Dakota Technical College. I am always very excited about the amazing opportunities that our legislators provide to have a conversation with constituents and people from our region to be able to talk about issues and to be able to get some ideas about where some of the complexities might be. I think this is a super important part of just what makes us America and what really makes South Dakota one of the best states in the country in terms of ability to get access to legislators, if not the best. I want to start by welcoming Dr. Steve Rankin. Dr. Jim Rankin. You can tell I'm nervous. To Western Dakota Tech, welcome. He's president at School of Mines. I also have one of our, yes. Thank you. I also have one of our board members for Western Dakota Technical College here, the chair of our board, Mr. Kurt Pokart, in the audience, so I want to acknowledge him. And Andrea Powers is in the back row waving her hand, another one of our board members. Western Dakota Tech, as a lot of you all know, is a 2-year public technical college. We have a very large region that we serve in western South Dakota. We offer a very wide variety of programs, from the programs you would consider to be the technical trades programs to a criminal justice program that just got a designation in cybersecurity from the federal government, to our wide range of health care programs as well. Our goal is to assist students that come to us in getting fantastic paying jobs and meeting the job needs in the region by doing that. So as I said before, welcome to Western Dakota Tech. I appreciate our legislators coming today. They have a heavy lift every year that they're in the session, and I hope that we have a fantastic and insightful Cracker Barrel this morning. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Dr. Bowman. We also have several city, county, and former elected officials in the audience today. Would you please stand and be recognized? All right, and of course we want to thank you, the audience, because that's what makes these Cracker Barrels so engaging and interesting. Thank you for your participation again. Now to introduce our legislative guests, but before I do, on behalf of the Rapid City community and Elevate, I want to thank you for your hard work. Each legislative session, you dedicate a lot of time. I see it up there. It's amazing, actually. Those are long days, so thank you very much for all of your hard work there. I'm going to make a quick comment. Senator Mike Dietrich is not here today, but I understand that he is recovering, getting better, and I hear reports that he is anxious to get back into the legislature and start getting to work again. So that's really good news to hear. So we're happy to hear that report. But introducing our legislators, starting over on the far end, Representative Steve Duffy from District 32. Representative Becky Drury from District 34. Senator Helene Duhamel from District 32. Representative Trish Ladner from District 30. Representative Mike Derby from District 34. And Senator David Johnson from District 33. Okay. Today's format, each of you will have 5 minutes to make opening comments, and then we'll go on to the submitted questions. So we'll start with Senator Dave Johnson.
Yes, good morning. It's a nice January morning. And we've all just come out of the deep freeze, one of the deepest freezes I've been in since I've been in western South Dakota, well, all of my life. So it's certainly one of the worst. So I'm glad to be here, and I'm glad you are here. I always look forward to this because this is my opportunity to stand up and proudly introduce my yellow t-shirt gang. So I would ask Daniel, Bill, Julie, Janelle, Heather, Karen, Fred, and of course Andy, if you guys would stand up. Folks, these are Black Hills Works advocacy people. They're out there in working hard for person-supported clients. They're working for the direct support providers that help Black Hills Works become so very, very effective. We're always in need in our direct service providers, Black Hills Works, and I just want to thank you people for always coming to these Cracker Barrels. It's always my privilege to introduce you, so thank you. Here they are sitting right behind President Steve Rankin. Well, I'll make this very quick. I was on, since I've been in the Senate, I've been on the Appropriations Committee. That was 3 years. I am no longer on the Appropriations Committee at my request, and I feel like I put my time in, as they say. I did my time, although I committed no crime. And I'm glad to be off appropriations because I am a legislator that enjoys policy. So I'm just going to go down a list. I've really surprised myself with the number of pieces of legislation that I'm sponsoring. Frankly, I'm surprised. I'm up to like 14 or 15, and I can't believe that I did that to myself. So 1 or 2 words per. I'm working on some legislation regarding upgrading the drone laws in the state of South Dakota. A big one that I'm on is supporting our firefighters at all levels, from volunteer up to state level firefighters on presumptive cancer care under work comp for our firefighters. I'm working with Representative Drury on that. I'm working on issues to provide a smoother vehicle for consolidation of counties throughout the state. I'm working on some property tax relief, trying to get a $1,000 credit for any Black Hills or any South Dakota citizen who would volunteer in some of the needed services in the state. $1,000 property tax credit for volunteer workers. Veteran service officers are paid for by the counties, although they are a state, essentially state mandated employee, so we're working on a way to get the state of South Dakota to pay for veteran service officers as opposed to counties. I'm working with a Democrat senator and a Republican House member on artificial intelligence and the dangers of deep fakes in our community. That is coming. We need to address it. We're already behind, so we're working on that. Playgrounds, pools, and parks. I was hoping to get registered sex offenders an inability to take up residence beside public parks, public pools, or private parks, pools, and playgrounds, but that was heard before the Judiciary Committee, and that has already been defeated. Airport funding is coming up. We're looking for a lot of money, a lot of money that is not available, frankly, but we are going to ask for airport funding for regional airports, that being Sioux Falls and Rapid City, and then assorted other areas, other airports across the state. We're looking for money to support that. Highway 79 South, we're working on some signage for that, and I'm working on getting some legislation to fund a fire training facility located here in Rapid City in the southeast part of town. And my light is still green, so I do want to say one other thing. I hear this every year at these Cracker Barrels. Thank you for all your work. Thank you for all your work. You guys put in a lot of hours. Frankly, we do this. We know what we're getting into. We do it because we want to serve the community. And when I'm asked questions today, my point is that my votes are not my votes. I always try to make sure that my votes in the legislature reflect the voters, the people who put me in here and my community. Keep that in mind. Sometimes I have to vote contrary or adverse to how I personally feel. But I'm representing my community. We know what we're getting into, all these accolades about hard work and so much time. Frankly, I really don't want to hear it anymore. So let's just get to work.
Good morning. Mike Derby, State Representative, District 34. Just always like to open up a little about myself. Our family moved to Rapid City in 1965, and we bought a house in 68 on Central Boulevard in Lanark, the corner, the one with the circular driveway on Central Boulevard. And since then, except for a few years in Arizona, I've lived in District 34, which is the west side of Rapid City, and actually went to Meadowbrook School and West Junior High back when there was a junior high, and graduated from Stevens High School in 75, so now you can do the math on that. And just an honor and a pleasure to represent District 34. This is my 10th year in the legislature. It's my 8th year on appropriations. I served 3 terms back in 97 to 02 under Governor Bill Janklow, so got some good tutelage under the good governor there. Came back after about an 18-year hiatus and came back, and now I'm in my 2nd term since I've come back. I'm currently chair of House Appropriations, so this will be my 8th year on appropriations all total. And as part of that, Appropriations is the only committee that's a joint committee between the House and the Senate. So it's a joint committee on appropriations. And it's this year, I am a co-chair with Senator Hunhoff. And it's a House bill. It alternates every year. So the general appropriations bill is a House bill. And so if you come to Pier, you'll see me with the gavel chairing appropriations. Couple factoids. The total budget's $7.3 billion. That's with a B. 2.4 billion of that are general funds, sales tax, other funds, etc. 4.9 billion are federal dollars. Okay, we're what's called a donee state. We receive more federal dollars than we generate. But one of the beautiful things that we do, well, before I move on that, there's a couple departments that get a lot of federal funds. The Department of Transportation, Health and Human Services, Department of Social Services, Education. So those are big federal dollars, and we kind of work around the fringes there. We don't have a lot to say or do with that. But this year will be, I'm proud to say, this will be the 135th year of a balanced budget. And unlike the federal government that's got $34 trillion in debt, at the end of session we will balance our budget, and which is a great thing. And I thought you'd like to know how many bills are so far have been introduced. Well, it's very curious. It's a tie between the House and the Senate at 192 each. So the senators for this year, even though we have twice the members, has been a little more prolific. So we'll be trending towards 500 bills for the session, I'm sure, before it's all done. We're in the 99th legislative session. Early in statehood, they met every other year, and that's why 99 doesn't match up with 135. So we're going to celebrate next session will be the 100th session for the state of South Dakota. So we're going to have a little celebration there. And if you need any information, we've got a fabulous website, sdlegislature.gov. Outstanding. I mean, if you want to track budgets, there's a tab on the top of the home page, and you just have to hit budget. And there's the department on the left-hand side, and it has all of the documents, all of the presentations that we receive as legislators. You can track the budget. Because we're a fiscal committee, as Senator Johnson mentioned, he's on the policy side. I'm on the fiscal side. Okay, all the other committees are policy committees. And so if you want to track fiscal, that you can do that. Otherwise, you can track bills and legislators very, very easily on that. I want to close out with a couple thoughts. One is I want to thank President Bowman for coming out. We had the technical college's budget hearing, and she brought a student, and a great student, very unique, the wife of an airman with 2 children that also go to Western Dakota Technical College. So she brought one person representing 3 people. I thought that was pretty cool, and that really makes a difference when there's somebody there advocating that's actually using the facilities and the processes, such as Black Hills Works brings their clients out. It makes a big impact. So in closing, you heard a little about Senator Mike Dietrich, and what I'd like to do is on the count of 3, he's listening online, say, "Get well, Mike." 1, 2, 3. Get well, Mike. All right, thank you.
Good morning. I'm Representative Trish Ladner for District 30. It's such a pleasure to be here today. It's good to be home. I think at one point in Pierre we were minus 46 degrees with wind chill factor. So it's very nice to be home. You're always about 10 degrees warmer though, I'm just telling you. So this year, who just got their property tax bill? How many people are happy with it? You almost had your hand up. I am a policy person, and this is my second term, so I'm starting my 4th year. 3 previous years, I worked on taxes, ag, grassland, elderly and senior and disabled tax credits. This year, I'm taking on owner-occupied single-family homes. And the bill's just been released. It's Senate Bill 167. And what it does is I'm asking for a reset back to 2020 property valuations for tax purposes, and go forward at a capped no more than 3% per year going forward. So I've done a spreadsheet of all 66 counties in South Dakota, and the percentage of the valuations that have gone up since 2020 to 2023, and it's 58.6% average across the whole state, which equates to over a $21 billion increase in valuations. So this is nobody's fault. I think you could say we had the perfect storm. We had COVID. We had extremely low interest rates, and we had people fleeing for their lives from blue states and heavy urban areas, which caused people to purchase homes and inflated prices, and we ended up with this. So the bill proposes that we reset to 2020 and cap the maximum increase at 3% going forward. Now, what you have to realize is that counties are capped already. County budgets are 3% plus new growth. Teachers are 3% increase or CPI or whichever is less. The average Social Security increase is 3.2. That's because you got a big pop during COVID, or it wouldn't have been that. And state retirement's 3.5, adjusted to COLA, adjusted down. So it seems 3 is a pretty good number. You know, if I'm retired on a fixed income and I'm getting 3.2% increase a year, my taxes can't go over 3, I might just be able to make it. So that's kind of the bill in a nutshell. And I'm hoping for your support. Send emails to your legislators, make phone calls to friends to send emails, call the legislators, come to Pier, because it's true. When you're there, your voice is heard. It makes a loud presence, and it makes the legislators stop and think a little bit more, that it's that important to you. So I know when we were fighting Custer State Park expansion, I got over 1,500 emails. East River legislators got like 700. That's never happened to them before, but they heard their voice. We didn't expand Custer State Park. So I've got other bills going, but to me, this is the most important one to talk about. This affects most people, and it affects like everybody who's a homeowner. And just to tell you how much that is, I forget. And well, never mind. Here it is. There are over 396,000 owner-occupied single-family dwellings in South Dakota, of which about 71,000 are over 65 years old. And so anyway, I'd love your support on it. I'd love your participation in it. If you have any questions, I have a handout that's kind of a little bullet point of what the bill does and what the legislation would do. So thank you. I appreciate your time.
I just can't have a microphone at my belly button. Helene Duhamel, Senator for District 32 in Rapid City. I was first appointed, twice reelected, running for reelection. Longtime Rapid City family, longtime broadcaster. Now I work at the Pennington County Sheriff's Office, and I've been serving in the legislature. This is my 5th session. It remains my greatest honor to represent the people of my city, my region, and my state. When people talk about some of these bills, there is nothing simple about any bill. We thought we had one for Pennington County solving a problem. Really complicated, hard to get legislation passed. A citizen legislature, we all come to work with a different perspective, and we have to respect each other's perspectives. It's a hard process, but I think it's an important one. And I hope each of you that are here today engaged enough to someday think about running, because that is actually the biggest problem. So few people can or will run for office. So I hope we can plant a seed. Someday somebody asks you to step up. A few of the pieces of legislation that I'm working on, we think it's out of the Senate, it's moving towards the House. But for the first time, we're looking for a funding source for Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force. Most crimes have a nexus with your computer or your phone. So we want, if convicted, somebody would pay $95 per device to download that phone or computer and take a look at what's on that. Increasingly, that's part of every crime. Absentee voting in Pennington County, this was something we thought would be really simple. Pennington County is open Monday through Thursday, 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. So when the law says you have to stop voting at 5 p.m., that makes people mad when we're open and they come to vote and we say, sorry, you can't vote. So we have that through the Senate, and hopefully we'll have success to make that small change in the House. Water. Not a sexy issue, but potentially the most important issue if you're thinking about your future for yourselves, your children, and your grandchildren. And so far, the bill is moving ahead with success to get the engineering funding for the West Dakota Regional Water System project, so to bring Missouri River all the way out here. And so we're really excited that that's part of using the ARPA dollars. Gap funding for the timber industry. I don't know if you're watching what's happening, but I don't know if it's the Biden administration, what's happening exactly, but since COVID, we haven't been able to clear our forests, thin them appropriately. We're very scared about the future of a fire, and the timber industry is on the verge of bankruptcy. So we're looking at potentially using some of those federal ARPA dollars as gap funding until they're allowed to do some thinning. Ellsworth, a couple of bills there. Those B-21 folks will be arriving very soon. Lots of needs in District 35, no senator in District 35. So all of us in Western South Dakota are joining forces to try to help. In particular, we want to help them fund a quarter of an elementary school. Twice before in South Dakota, we have done that back in the Mickelson years. And we're hoping South Dakota will again help. The feds are going to pay 2/3 of an elementary school. We're asking the state for $15 million. That bill should be dropping this week. They also want concurrent juvenile jurisdiction, kind of a complicated thing, but we're working with them on something that they've asked for there. But here's a really big one. This year in particular, we spent the summer looking at how to better fund counties. More than 80% of what counties do are mandates from the state and the federal government and no funding to go with it. And no sales tax to help when we're growing, only property taxes. So one of the things we're pushing forward is indigent legal services. Again, not a sexy subject, but we're really looking at the best, most efficient way to provide services for the defense of people who do not have the resources. Regionalize it in the state, and then a quarter of the alcohol tax to go to fund this ongoing. Really exciting project. Probably won't hear a lot about it in the news. It's really complicated, but this is something you should be paying attention to. Potentially the most significant piece of legislation in the last 4 decades. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Becky Drury, and I serve now in District 34. If you haven't watched the news, the governor appointed me over to fill a vacancy in 34. I was in 32 with these two lovely people on each side of me. And so I've moved over there, and I will be running again in District 34. So if you have any questions about that later, how that all happened, you can ask me later. Some of the things I'm working on, one of the things that was just added to my list was Senate Bill 57. That is a workforce initiative by Governor Noem, and basically what it says, it creates uniform standards and procedures for criminal history. So if you come out of the penitentiary and you learn how to be a plumber in the penitentiary, you know, then you go to apply for a job why would that be held against you? You know how to be a plumber, but now it's being held against you, but hopefully you've paid the dues for your crime. So we want to try to pass that through. That barely made it through the Senate side, so I'm kind of excited to see what it does on the House side. Should be interesting. But it would affect people like barbers, plumbers, electricians. It's Section 36 of the code, I believe. So other things I'm working on and what I'm getting some feedback on right now is I dropped a bill on short-term rentals. So this, you might think Airbnbs, VRBOs, and I've seen both sides of this issue, and I think it's okay, because if the counties and the cities are going to regulate the short-term rentals and make them non-existent or existent but go by certain standards, then I think we should do the same thing for long-term rentals. Because I could probably bet you $10 that if you drove up to a short-term rental versus a long-term rental, that short-term rental is going to look much nicer and be well kept, because they are going to try to keep their customers coming in. I have a couple of bills that I'm working on with the Senate side, and they all have to do with admissibility of similar crimes, like in sexual assault cases or child molestation cases, SB 97 and 98. And it's just kind of, to me, the phrase is, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. So if you have to bring up the woman's past that she was promiscuous, maybe you could bring up the man's past that he was, had porn. So those things are coming out. Also, the SB 149 dealing, same thing with civil matters. I really think that people need to think about supporting the Douglas school system. Most of us here have really supported the bomber coming in. These people that come to Douglas defend us every day, and they probably defend us in ways we never see it. But we are asking these young families to come here, and then the adults put their lives on the line, our national defense, across America. And we should be able to support them with a school. And I know other schools are going to come out and say, well, you didn't give us money for our school, and you didn't give us money for our school, and they're right. But it's different, because this is a national issue. We have seen some terrible things happen recently overseas. And we know we've been involved in some of those issues. And those have been people from Ellsworth. So let's support them by supporting their families and their young children. I really encourage that. And I'm really glad that Representative Derby gave all of his list of qualifications. I did not know he was also a cheerleader. But I appreciate that. Should have listed that in your qualifications, Representative. Thank you very much for coming today, and we look forward to the dialogue.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Steve Duffy. I'm the House Representative for District 32, Central Rapid City. I am in my second year of the first term, so I'm not a rookie. I can't use that excuse that I don't really know what's going on, but I really don't know what's going on. You do learn a little more each time, and it is being helpful. Just a little bit about me. I'm a fourth generation West River. I grew up in Fort Pierre. I've lived in District 32 for 41, 42 years, something like that. So when I got out of college, I didn't want to go back to Fort Pierre, but I knew I had to go back to South Dakota, and so that's what I did. I'm on transportation. I have transportation committee, and I'm on commerce and energy. And I have recently, because Representative Olson resigned for health reasons, I've added taxation to my list, so seems like there's plenty going on right now. Firstly, I'd like to thank President Bowman. People that know me or heard me talk last year, I'm a small business guy. I think I worked, my entire working career, I think I worked 6 weeks for a publicly traded company as the worst 6 weeks of my life. That's just not who I am. I'd rather die than work in that. That's overstatement. But I'm a small business guy. I'm a South Dakota guy who just wanted to stay in South Dakota. Miss Bowman's business is producing the trades at this school. That's a fantastic way to stay in this town. You can get a middle class lifestyle almost day one. If you know young kids are out there, I just recommend it so much. I talked to a lot of these people. They're looking elsewhere, but we need the trades. I'd love to see that area grow. President Rankin at South Dakota School of Mines, one of the things that I really love about what they do is they have all these smart kids, and some of them do want to stay, and they have an incubator. And if something comes to fruition from an idea, they can move to Elevate, and that can develop. And they have developed some companies that have produced jobs for South Dakotans, and I love that. And him and I grew up in the same town, and so I'm just thrilled that he's out here. He understands South Dakota the way I do. Like I mentioned, I have focused mainly on small economic development, small business, and that includes, you gotta have affordable housing, and we did do some of that. And you can look around; there's hundreds of apartments going up, and that's fantastic. Probably could use a little more of the single families, and I think we're working on some zoning and some other issues that might allow some of that, some infill and things like that. Let me see. In transportation, Senator Johnson's working on this airport bill, and he's brought me in because he knows that's a kind of a passion of mine. We have grown a lot for a small town. Sioux Falls has grown, but now we're really growing, and it's just absolutely critical that we upgrade that airport. I spent some time out there behind the scenes just to figure out what the problem was, and really, one of the reasons that airfares stay high is because you can't get enough airplanes to come into the, in hubs or regional areas like ours. It's a spoke system. Most of the airplanes want to come in and leave about the same time. Well, there's only so many seats, and that pushes the thing up. Well, that reduces economic viability for small businesses who need airports. So that's one thing that he's brought me into that I've really thrown myself, maybe the most important thing. We also had a great conversation yesterday, or day before yesterday, on autonomous vehicles, trying to put some rules in place. Whoa, I better quit talking here. It seems like I'm a politician. I'm working on that. I'm working on, those are the things I'm working on. A couple things I'm sponsoring: airports, work for Medicaid. We're doing something with PUC, try to help them a little bit in some of their rate cases. They're getting to be more rate cases. So I think with that, I'll stop for now. Thank you.
All right, thank you, everybody. Now we'll get into the questions, and it looks like we do have a good amount of them pouring in here. So, first question. South Dakota has recently boasted about a surplus and reserves of $100 million and $335 million in their coffers. These are excess funds that have been collected from taxpayers through sales tax. Why? Question number one, why did the legislators not deliver on grocery tax relief? And a follow-up question, what bills are you sponsoring to reduce the size of state government and reduce the sales tax rate?
Mike Derby, District 34. It's like there was like 4 questions in there. Okay, let me talk about, I'll pick off the one about the reserves and the budget. We have a prison to build, a men's prison to build. The prison in Sioux Falls was built about the time we became a state, and that's a fact. That's hard to believe. The governor has proposed to sweep those one-time monies that are over the budget reserve into an incarceration fund. So we are trying to pay as much as we can in cash, although there are opportunities to bond, because usually big projects like this over a long period of time are bonded. But the bond market's not in a real good spot. If we'd have bonded $200 million 2.5 years ago, we'd be dancing right now because the bond rates were a lot lower. So we as a legislature, that's the governor's proposal, and we as a legislature, we are getting our priorities. Will we let the governor sweep all the one-time funds into the incarceration fund? Will we do a little bit of bonding? Will we do some of our legislative priorities? That's where we're at. We're day 12 of the session, and appropriators, we are still listening to budget hearings. Then we'll have a little revenue information coming down the line, and we're still getting all of the bills in. So I think that seemed like that was the biggest first question. I'll let somebody else handle the hard ones. Thanks.
Thank you. Yes, I wanted to mention, Mr. Sadoff, did I introduce the folks out here in the yellow t-shirt? Or can I do that again?
Yes, you did.
No?
Well, we better
Okay.
move on. They're great folks.
So, big government. Now, interestingly, I mentioned earlier that I was on a team with the House representative person here called Representative Drury. We're working together on presumptive cancer care for firefighters. But I just heard her stand up and say that she's now the sponsor of Senate Bill 57. Oh, you haven't signed on yet? Well, maybe I can convince you not to, because this is, in my opinion, an example of big government. Government stepping up where we don't need them. Senate Bill 57 is simply came from the Department of Labor and Regulation, where they want to put in a panel that is not necessary, because the Board of Dentistry, the Board of Doctors, all of these different medical associations and trade associations already have the boards that have to approve of persons that are trying to get board certification. We don't need the state government. We don't need another level of state government doing what the private industry is already doing, and already doing very effectively. It came before the Senate Commerce Committee, and it won only by 55 to 45 vote in the committee, and then it went before the Senate floor, and it was exactly the same. 55 in favor of this, 45% against. I see this as big government intruding where we don't need it, and so that's why I oppose that. And I want to also thank Representative Duffy for speaking out again on the airport board, on the airport issue, because as you can hear, he's passionate about it, and that's why I chose him to be on my team with that. Thank you, and I'll try to shut up on time. Thank you, folks.
Helene Duhamel again. Not that we have to go with the governor's budget, but she is pushing every available dollar, short of $20 million-ish, into the incarceration fund. So there won't be any extra money for much of these really important projects that we're talking about, whether it's the airport, the Douglas Ellsworth School, Forest. I mean, so keep in mind, this is not a year with a lot of money. We are slowly right-sizing. We jumped up with ARPA dollars. That's still circulating. We have hundreds of millions that have not even been spent. So we're waiting for our economy to go back to where it probably will. So to make big decisions now, like reducing a lot of taxes, is probably not the best idea if you're being a fiscal conservative. So we want to give it some time. That was the reason for the sales tax sunset. Right now, it doesn't make any sense to get rid of that. We're only 6 months into this, And we have an effort to put the grocery tax on the ballot. So if people decide to do that, that's also 100 million-ish. You can't do both right now with the size of our budget. So that's why fiscally conservative, you have to wait and see what happens. So that's part of what's going on there. Grocery tax, that'll be your decision on the ballot. Sales tax, not a lot of people have even noticed. And my problem with that is our tourists get a break, and we need to leverage their effort to help us fund our government. Thank you.
Yeah, I think we're good. Moving on to the next question, we've got a couple questions around Senate Bill 89 and 90. Can you share your stance on supporting or opposing these bills which reduce notice requirements for evictions? Specifically, how do these bills support renter constituents in western South Dakota?
These are hard ones to understand. So basically, it's residential property, not commercial. So the idea is your adult son moved in with you, and then he establishes residency and won't move out. That was one of the examples. So residential. The other thing is a floor, not a ceiling. So you have the lease, and you agree to the lease terms, and most lease terms are 30 days. If you want to go to a shorter lease term, you would make that agreement, or if the lease runs out, you would move to this type of arrangement. Again, it's the floor. Truly, if someone is being evicted, that's a multi-months process. That is not a fast process. Rarely is somebody evicted that quickly if it goes into court. But oftentimes, let's say the traveling nurse, the traveling physician, they want the shorter terms. You have to keep in mind that the landlord is also a small business person. Oftentimes, we're talking residential, not commercial. So they, as long as they have somebody potentially living in their home or the home that they're renting, they're not getting paid through this whole eviction process. So it is complicated. It is worth listening to the audio from the prime sponsor if you have an interest in that bill. And it's moving on to the House, so you still have time to weigh in if you want.
Okay, moving on to, we have a question around House Bill 1042. 1042. As a pro-life state and having a budget surplus, what are we doing to help children in poverty, and why are we not providing free school lunches? Excuse me, 1042.
I'd like to just address a little bit of housekeeping here. This is a House bill that was defeated in a House committee. The Senate has not seen this bill as yet. So if apparently we're having difficulty getting the bill up on the overhead up here, but it looks like it was a very, very close defeat in the House committee that heard this bill, but the Senate has not seen it yet and will not see it because it was killed in a House committee. I think that's important for people to understand that as a senator, you don't get to see everything. And as a House member, you don't even get to see everything if you're not sitting on that committee. It was 8-7 to table the bill, and that's where it died.
Trish Ladner, District 30. I have met with my superintendents for District 30, Edgemont, Hot Springs, Hill City, Custer, Hermosa. And we have a school program that feeds the children. Some feed them twice a day, and they're okay. They will always feed the children. They have ranchers donating beef, buffalo to their program, and if a child is like in the rears, or the parents are in the rears on the child's stipend, they feed them anyway. So it was defeated. It went to the 41st day. They called the 41st day because we're in session for 40 days. So literally, it's kind of circular file. This year, we're in session for 38 days. So I'm confident that even though this was sent to the 41st day, our children are still going to be taken care of because this is South Dakota. Thank you.
I did not see this bill. I just literally just read it just now. But I heard a lot of talk about it, this and some variations of this bill. And I'm not here to defend whatever happened because I don't know. I didn't get to listen to the testimony. But one thing I did hear continually is that there are federal guidelines for free and reduced lunches, and they're different, and I don't know what they are. But one thing I did hear is that prior to COVID, people were pretty diligent with their paperwork. After COVID, because I think they just opened it up during COVID, and then people that probably do qualify or will qualify have, and I'm not saying all, because I certainly don't know that, but they have not followed through on the paperwork because there is federal funds, a federal program, and it does refer to that in the bill. So I do think that maybe some people should get qualified if they'll do the paperwork, but I don't know that entirely. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next question, does the legislature have a place in the growing child care, the growing need for child care situation? Does the legislature have a place in the growing need for the child care situation?
This year, the ask is for $250,000 to do a study to identify how big a problem it is in every corner of the state, because we actually suspect it's a bigger problem in the rural, less populated counties than even in Rapid City and Sioux Falls. So that's what we're hoping for this year, a study. Actually, if you're paying attention, Rapid City and Elevate are leading the charge. The Vakurovich Foundation is pioneering something called a tri-share model. So they're paying a third of the cost of a child in daycare. The employee pays a third, and the employer pays a third. It's going to be a multi-year study. We're launching it here in Rapid City to see how this goes and if it can work statewide. In most states, the state does cover that third, not the philanthropic Vakurovich Foundation. With this governor, won't happen. She thinks that child care is the family's responsibility. So we have to wait and see how big a problem it is and how we want to proceed. But the fact is the state is losing some $350 million annually, and we have such a workforce shortage. So we can't find people with a pulse to apply for most jobs. We have to think about what's holding people back who want to work. And if we can figure this out, potentially with this study, we think it's a worthwhile thing. So that's one of the things we'll be asking for this year.
Mike Derby, District 34. So in appropriations, if there was some money attached to it, we would see this eventually for daycare. But I've gone to a number of hearings, and I can tell you for one thing, this is one of the hardest issues to get your hands around that I've been involved with. We had someone from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce come to an Elevate presentation and made a presentation. I kept waiting for the silver bullet. And there wasn't at the end of the day. So childcare is a big issue. I believe the state does have a role in this. In addition to TriShare, I heard we had the After School Association in Pierre this last week, and I heard an innovative concept that being from the private sector and a serial entrepreneur my whole life, it was kind of a co-op concept. So I'm just spitballing right now, but think of this. What if 5 businesses got together, maybe like-minded businesses? One of them more than likely has some excess space within one of their facilities. And those five businesses create a co-op, a daycare co-op, managed by a professional like the YMCA, okay? They all have a vested interest in doing this. And this is an unsustainable business model. I hate to tell you this, but this is hard. We pumped millions of one-time monies into the daycare facilities through our ARPA and COVID funds, and we still have a problem. It's just hard. It's not sustainable. We got to be creative. Thank you.
Thank you. Got a couple questions here around the same topic. This one's submitted by Burton Sly. One of the jobs as legislators is to protect the rights of constituents that includes their private property rights. What's your position on legislation to restrict the use of eminent domain or the threat to use eminent domain?
This is a hot topic in Pierre. You know, we have a lot of farmers and ranchers that are, you know, don't use eminent domain. This is a private property, you know. However, we don't want to carry it too far. Because if we do too much on eminent domain and shut it down, how are you ever going to build a transmission line, a water line, any other type of pipeline that you and I rely on every day to turn our lights, water, run our sewer systems? So we have to be careful that we balance that eminent domain. I think that one of the companies last year got a little carried away with their pipeline, and you know, it ended up in a lot of hearings at the PUC. I think we're gonna hear it all again this year, and I don't have a problem hearing it. I just don't want it to go so far that we impede having power, water, gas, all these things that we run to our homes every day, and we expect when we go home and flip on the lights that it's there. So we just have to take careful steps and not go too far.
Trish Ladner, District 30, again. I've talked to a lot of ranchers because the CO2 pipeline's been a big deal. I've talked to a lot of utility commissioners because eminent domain on the other side's a big deal to them. I have no problem. Eminent domain, my property is my property. I have no problem protecting those rights as a legislator. I also have a huge problem with eminent domain as it relates to a for-profit, privately owned company. I don't think that a privately owned, for-profit company should be able to come in and declare eminent domain and actually condemn your property because they want to make money. There has to be a better way. If it's a train, utility lines, water lines, absolutely. I think anyone would yield to that. But I think we need to be very careful. You give them an inch and they're going to take a mile. Thank you.
I mentioned earlier that I do focus on economic development. This one, growing up in a farm community, it did trouble me a year ago when I looked at it. So I talked to a lot of people, and a lot of the people I talked to were corn farmers. We don't raise corn out here. I felt like we didn't have a dog in the fight on this particular issue, this East River issue on this carbon pipelines. But the corn farmers, and that is I believe that's our biggest crop. If it isn't, it's in the top two. But they feel like there is a very, it's a hard fact if they can't clean up that ethanol to sell it, they make like $1.20 more per bushel on their corn when they sell it if it's cleaned up. They can sell it out of state. Otherwise, it's kind of a dirtier version of ethanol, and there's not a huge market for it. I met with some people from a company called Gevo, and what they're trying to do is build this large aircraft fuel plant, and I think, I can't remember exactly. Lake Preston. 80 to 90 employees, high paying jobs, but they need, and there's ethanol plants, about 5 of them right there around them, so they can, they'll buy all of that, or they'll buy that corn, they'll move this, that fuel. It is, but they can't do it without the cleaning up the carbon. So I think there's 2 sides of this thing. My side, I would probably fall. I've talked to a number of farmers. Most of the farmers that I've talked to are very happy about that. Some are very unhappy. I'm not going to say it's one-way street, but it would produce a lot of jobs, but more importantly, it would help the corn farmers. Thank you.
We wouldn't have the interstate system in South Dakota without eminent domain. We will not get water to western South Dakota without eminent domain. Many of the companies, the trains are private for-profit, Burlington, Northern Santa Fe. You can't just say private-public. This is something we have to give some hard thought to, but without the threat, we won't get anything done in the future.
Well, we've heard legislators up here talk on both sides. You've heard commitments from, well, not commitments, but opinions from legislators up here today in a small group, some in favor of the CO2 pipelines and eminent domain, some opposed. Now, I want to clarify the foundational aspect of the United States of America is private property rights. We have to agree with that. Now, I want you to remember that it's in the Constitution of the state of South Dakota that eminent domain exists. It's there for a reason. It's in the Constitution. Now, I want you to put yourselves in the position that the legislators are in right now, because it's about a 50-50 battle out there. I haven't made up my mind yet, but I'm going to listen to my constituents. I've got over 6,000 emails. Don't email me. Phone calls. I'll announce my phone call or my phone number. Send me a text or send me a voicemail or talk with me on the phone. I'll answer my phone. Folks, seriously, just close your eyes a minute and put yourself in the position of the legislators who are up here that are going to have to make a vote on this. Because no matter where you go with this, half of the population of South Dakota is going to be angry with you. How do you do that? Respect private property rights, absolutely. But respect the Constitution of the state of South Dakota and respect the fact that eminent domain exists and it's there for a reason.
All right, thank you. Moving on to the next question. We have a couple around this. 3 districts in the Rapid City area are currently without representation due to unfilled vacancies or leave of absence. How are those constituent voices being heard?
Since I just caused one of those vacancies, I'll take a hit. But you're right. Due to illness or other things, we have some vacancies, and they seem to all be in West River, unfortunately. I'm just going to say that even though there's a vacancy in 32, you can reach out to any of us with your concerns as a constituent. We don't serve. When I go to Pierre, I just don't serve my little area of Rapid City. I focus on Rapid City, West River, South Dakota. There's very few bills that actually hit just your district. So that's one of the reasons that you can reach out to any of us, because we all vote, right? So we all have a vote in the matter. So I would say, yep, you do probably have one vote less, but there is an election coming up. Please run. When I went to get coffee, a gentleman in the back of the room wanted to know how to run for office. We're going to talk afterwards. So kudos to encouraging people to run, because people here, there are people in the audience now that are going to run to fill those vacancies. As far as us filling them, we cannot. That is Governor Noem's job. We can't fill the vacancies. No, even if we wanted to, we can't do it. So I would just say, if you feel underrepresented, go to a different person, go to a different legislator. We listen to everybody across South Dakota. We all get emails from everywhere touch point in South Dakota, and we read them and we listen to them.
Mike Derby, District 34. I've been hanging around the legislature a long time. I've never seen a situation like this before. And it is hard. It's going to cause some pinch points here pretty quick when we start moving into bills that need a majority, and then especially 2/3. I mean, it's going to cause some issues. We have been in constant contact with Governor Noem. As many of you know, we're waiting for an advisory position from the South Dakota Supreme Court on definitions of conflict of interest. And I don't know how they're going to do it, how they're going to come up with something that will satisfy a citizen legislature. But we hope that we'll be getting an opinion soon. And then there's people in the queue, they've all applied, and I hear from them quite often, where are we at? So we hope to fill these seats soon. We've had to reshuffle some of the other legislators. Representative Duffy said he's serving on another committee. So we've backfilled some of the committees. We're doing the best we can, but I too am real worried as we move down the home stretch here. We got to get this done.
All right, thank you. Taking a question from Facebook right now. Are there any plans to protect water and natural areas from potential impacts of mining activities in the Black Hills?
And if you don't mind, do you mind repeating that question, please?
Yeah, are there any plans to protect water and natural areas from potential impacts of mining activities in the Black Hills?
Well, I'll probably get some snowballs thrown at me. Thank goodness most of the snow is melted. I come down squarely in favor of mining activities in the Black Hills of South Dakota, because it does not. Modern technology at the School of Mines, metallurgy, geography, or not geography, but geology. We've battled all the problems with water. This is a hysterical issue, in my opinion. Mining, modern day mining, does not involve water pollution or arsenic or anything else. And the mines, the minerals that we're after are rare earth minerals that right now we're purchasing from China. What do you want to do about that? I do not feel under any circumstance, a graduate from the School of Mines, although I'm not in mining, that we are not threatening our water. Our water is not under any kind of threat, and therefore I feel that this question is a little bit, we must assume the premise that we're affecting our water. That's not happening. So I would encourage us to continue with the advancement of modern technology and mining in the state of South Dakota, anywhere in the state of South Dakota. We need to step up so that we're not overtaken with our rare earth minerals from China.
Thank you. Question on Senate Bill.
Just a clarification, are there any mining bills introduced?
HB 1043 is a proposed tax on lithium and lithium mining, and Senate Bill 111 would change the insurance requirements for sand and gravel mines.
Yeah, Representative Chafee brought a bill to put a tax on lithium mining because right now there's several lithium mining claims throughout the hills, but there's no tax on them. So it's at least a way to get some revenue off that. Last year I did quite a few visits on energy, and I think that sometimes when you talk to people, we think about the mining we saw in the 70s, and that is not the way mining works today. With the technology and everything that's come forth, it's different. You know, the reclamation of coal mines is different. I'm sure there's some place, if you go in North Dakota by where they coal mine, you would never even know that that had been mined for coal because it's been put back better. Now, we all have this tainted, we all remember, or not maybe all, not so. I remember going to Deadwood when I was in high school and seeing the creek. And it was, you know, dirty and icky. But that isn't the technology that's used now. It's much better. I'm not saying it won't affect anything because never say never. But our technology now is so much better with the mining. Our graduates do a lot better job. I think that mining has gotten a bad rap over the years. But yet, if you have one of these, you're using something that was mined.
I think Senator Johnson said it best. They have really cleaned up that process. There's no question over the course of the century, there's been some damage done to the natural resources. I went up and looked at a coal mine in North Dakota this summer, and then I went to a coal plant who brings a bunch of power into South Dakota through Basin Electric. The truth of the matter is, we really can't afford to lose that power source yet. I mean, there's the Green New Deal, and that's coming, but that's a long ways away. And when people turn on their lights, whether it's personal or business or whatever, they expect it to work and they expect it to be affordable. So it is a reality that mining is still going to be a part of this. Coal is going to be a part of this, natural gas. I also went and looked at a nuclear plant in Minneapolis. There's 2 nuclear plants, one on each side of the city, and they're 60-year-old plants. Or Geiger count, well, I don't know what it is, something that measures. This is an old plant, spent most of the day in it, and I would have got far more radiation flying from LA to Hawaii. I mean, they've done a lot to clean this stuff up. I think we are rare earth minerals, you know, and Mr. Rankin has a new building to look at this because that is the future. Oil and coal, that's the past and the present. The future is going to be these rare earth minerals. And so I do think we're going to have to keep mining them. I just saw where the largest electric car company in the world, you think it's Tesla, and now it's a Chinese company, and their secret was they started out mining lithium and they just built a car around the lithium mines. So it is very, it's not going away, it's part of our life. Thank you.
Trish Ladner, District 30. I just want to encourage you a little bit because it's fearful. Mining, you think of strip mining, and it's a fearful subject. But when we heard the bill on taxing lithium, Quinn Neff testified, and he's a graduate of School of Mines and represents the mining society or organizations. He told us even though there are a lot of lithium claims in the Black Hills, there is no mining, there's exploration, where they go and they make boreholes to take samples, and they meticulously fill those boreholes when they're done. So there is no damage, there's no repercussions from it at this point, but there is no active mining. So I just want to encourage you with that because it is kind of a frightful subject. So.
Sorry to get up here twice, but I did see this post on Facebook. So if you're all bored this afternoon and you want to drive down to Custer, they're having a meeting in Custer today at 1:30. It's been moved to the Armory because they're expecting a big crowd. And if anybody wants to come up and read this Facebook post, that's fine. But it talks all about, you know, there's concerned citizens around mining. So 1:30 this afternoon in Custer, if this is a issue that's close to your heart.
All right, thank you. Good, thorough reviews. Moving on to the next question regarding Senate Bill 56. What is your position on e-bikes on the Mickelson Trail?
Sorry, this is me again. I ride the Mickelson Trail all the time. I was one of the first riders when the trail opened 25 years ago, 26 years ago. So, and I don't ride an e-bike. I don't have a problem with e-bikes, but what I had a problem with what Game Fish and Parks was proposing was e-bikes that only had a throttle, so you didn't even have to pedal. To me, that's more of a scooter. So a couple people, we testified. The bill got amended by Senator Dybert out of Deadwood, Lee Deadwood, or Lawrence County, sorry. No, not even Lawrence County. Wherever Senator Dybert's from, Northern Hills. And he put it back to Class 1, which that really wasn't what Game Fish and Parks wanted. So when it went over to the House side, to House Ag, they tabled the bill. So I don't have a problem with e-bikes on the Mickelson Trail, but I do have a problem with e-bikes that can go up to 30 miles an hour. You don't have to pedal, and you only have a throttle, because then what does that open it up to next? It's, you know, motorcycles and scooters and everything. And what most people don't know, horses have the right-of-way on the Mickelson Trail. They actually have first right on the trail. So go out, enjoy the trail, but enjoy it at a pace where you can actually enjoy it. So 2 things that scare me on the Mickelson Trail: rattlesnakes and an e-bike coming at me extremely fast, either from behind or in front, because when they wreck, they're much heavier than a regular bike. They're just heavier, so they can cause more damage.
It's me again. I serve on Ag and Natural Resources, and I just want to put a kudos out to Game Fish and Parks, because they listened. They heard the people say, we don't want Class 3. We don't want e-bikes on Mickelson. So they requested that the bill be tabled, meaning they withdrew it to do a study, to investigate it more. So I do appreciate that the departments listen, at least Game Fish and Parks did. And I'm sure it'll come back again, but we had people there to testify that didn't get a chance to testify, and I feel bad about that, but when a bill's tabled, it's kind of null and void, so the debate's not open, but, you know, they're listening, and that's a good thing.
You know, this is a fun one. People feel very passionate about it. But really the question is, do you want to regulate behavior or equipment? Basically, right now, people are using all the different classes of e-bikes. And so people may have purchased these really expensive bikes, and maybe they know they're not supposed to be there, but they are, and they can be hard to identify to the layperson. So maybe, instead of restricting what kind of bike, maybe we have to have a speed limit, for example. So I don't know exactly, but it has opened up an interesting conversation on the Mickelson Trail.
Yeah, I just can't help myself. I mean, we're talking about property tax and cancer for firefighters, and then we come up with this goofy stuff. You know, I've never owned an e-bike. Yeah, I call it goofy. I do call it goofy. I don't know the difference between an e-bike and my good old Schwinn with the sissy bar. Do you guys remember that? I mean, we're talking, don't worry, we are not going to have South Dakota State troopers out there every other mile arresting people for speed limit, for violating a speed limit. I think this is funny. It's gone a long ways. Everybody's interested in it, but I don't believe that this is the kind of thing that, frankly, that we should be bothered with out in the state capitol.
All right. Thank you for addressing those. Question regarding Senate Bill 57, which I believe is around formerly incarcerated workers, I believe. Would this help fill open job positions, and what are the risks?
Boy, I'm sorry, there are only 6 legislators up here, so I don't. Senate Bill 57 was hurting Senate Commerce. We talked about it a little bit earlier. It barely passed in Commerce Committee, and then it also went to the Senate floor, barely passed there. The problem with Senate Bill 50, no, I don't believe it'll help the workforce. I don't believe that it's going to help at all. Again, the South Dakota Department of Labor and Regulation came up with this bill, and they said effectively that we can do a better job than the private industry can in monitoring who comes to work for the different associations. I don't think this is a place for government when it's already being effectively managed by private industry. It's that simple.
This may be a little bit more government, but here's one of the things that this is purported to do. So the Electric Commission receives many applications each year from the South Dakota Housing Project Electrician Program inside the Mike Durfee State Prison. In the past, anyone with a violent crime convicted would be... Durfee. Sorry. If you think that's bad, I get called Derby all the time in Pierre, so there you go. Violent crime would be issued a restricted license while incarcerated, but then denied a license when they exit the prison and attempt to apply for an unrestricted license without any consideration of whether the crime directly relates or if the applicant has been rehabilitated. So we send them to prison, we're punishing them, we give them a trade, they come out. The governor's office sees this as a path to get these people plugged in to the workforce. And I know that the good Senator Johnson doesn't like it. It's one of these very close things that you have to consider. And we're not all going to agree on everything, then that's okay. That's why we're here.
Thank you. This question is from Sarah Gross. Considering teacher recruitment and retention, would you support the governor's 4% increase to education?
Trish Ladner, District 30. Of course. I would. Japan's a good example. The highest paid jobs in Japan are their teachers. They value education. They value their next generation coming up. I wish we could do more. But yes, absolutely support 4%.
Mike Derby, State Representative. I'm going to just talk about process, first of all. This was in the governor's budget recommendation, and 4%. Prior to the budget recommendation at the budget address, kind of the word on the street was 3%. The governor proposed 4%, so I think a lot of people were pleasantly surprised with that. Now, it kind of enters into the realm of the appropriators here, and it's in the governor's budget, so we're going to take a hard look at all the numbers. And then we'll make a decision. So from an appropriator's point of view, I have to keep my powder dry until we hear from the caucus, see what the revenue numbers are, compare it to the governor's budget address, and then we'll move forward. So stay tuned, but I haven't heard a lot of negative about it, I will say that.
Thank you. Related question, it's kind of a related question here from Julie Kopp with the A-Team. The legislature asked for annual updates as to what various Medicaid funding should be. By doing this, shouldn't the outcome of what is funded be driven off of the rate reviews versus just inflationary factors based solely on the consumer price index?
Okay, Mike Derby again. That's a great question. Whose question was that? Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. So I've learned a lot about rate methodology, inflation. I've learned a lot about the community support providers in particular. Last year, we went to what's called 100% methodology, where we're attempting to keep the CSPs whole. The governor had proposed 90%, and we as appropriators went to 100. We have a work group. You asked about Medicaid part, correct? We have a work group on Medicaid, and a work group is outside of our committee where we have 4 topics. One of the topics is Medicaid and Medicaid expansion, and we're doing a deep dive on that. My goal is to keep you where you are in the future. I kind of assumed that once we got you to 100% methodology, maybe there was a mechanism to keep moving that forward, but I'm learning not so much. So we are addressing it, and we'll take a hard look at it, but that's a great question. Thank you.
Thank you. Question around Senate Bill 72, which I think has to do with insurance tax credit scholarship programs. Does this divert public funds to be a private scholarship program? Senate Bill 72.
Well, again, I'm not an appropriator, but indirectly it does. What this bill, if I recall correctly, this Senate bill, is a scholarship program that is funded by insurance companies. And so the insurance company gets a tax credit for applying contributions to education and to scholarships. So it's private money from the insurance companies, but they do get a tax credit for applying that scholarship or for contributing that scholarship. You tell me, is that affecting public funds? Well, indirectly it is, and yet it's private money that's going to these scholarships. Once again, a deeper dive into any piece of legislation always presents issues that are not readily understood by the general public or by a simple reading of the title of the bill.
David said it exactly right. I think it does. The only thing I will add to that is when it was pitched to me, it was $3.5 million going to $5 million. And it was for the neediest of people who could qualify for this scholarship to go to, that maybe weren't functioning as well in the public school or the public system. So, although it hasn't got over to us yet, the way it was put to me is that, look, there are some kids that would never have an opportunity to do this, and this scholarship would give them that shot. And so if it comes my way, I'd probably support it.
Okay, Mike Derby, the process part of it was it came out of House Education 10-5. Then it was referred to the House Committee on Appropriations, and we're doing that. We started this last year where there's a bill. It's kind of a quasi-fiscal policy bill. And what we're doing is we're sending these bills to a policy committee first, asking them to look at the policy. Does the policy make sense? We will worry about the dollars. If you want to send it out with $1 to appropriations, feel free. If you want to amend it, if you think it's a good idea, then we will deal with the dollars. This kind of fell into a gray area, so it's headed to House Committee on Appropriations, but Representative Carr on the floor asked for a fiscal note. And that slows the train down a little, because then Legislative Research Council has to do some homework. Does this impact the general fund? And so we just want to get our arms around, does it or doesn't it? And then we'll get that answer. And so that's called a fiscal note. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question, what issues will be on the ballot this year?
Are you asking what's already been approved for the ballot or what's in the works?
I would say it's wanting to know what's in the works.
Okay.
I'm
Well,
reading between the lines there.
all right. Well, I'll touch on one. Possibly abortion as an issue could be on the ballot. They haven't, the circulators of that do not have the number of signatures yet. But what we did as legislators is we have House Concurrent Resolution 6008 out there by Representative Kamak, and most of the legislators in the House have signed on to it. It's a concurrent resolution opposing an initiated measure to place the right to an abortion in the Constitution of South Dakota. So there's a couple issues in that sentence, abortion and Constitution. So that'll be circulated through the chambers, but we don't know yet if that'll be on the ballot.
So I would encourage any of you, if you have questions like this, you can go to the South Dakota Secretary of State's site, sdsos.gov, and it'll give you a roundup of what's been approved so far and what hasn't. So approved for circulation are top 2 primary elections. I think that's where, when you go to the primary, it doesn't matter if you're Republican, Democrat, Independent, no party, you can have your name on the ballot. The top 2 go on to the general election, if I'm remembering that right. Prohibiting taxes on anything sold for human consumption, food tax. Term limits is on there. South Dakota medical marijuana program, trying to repeal that. And then another one trying to legalize recreational. So you're going to have a plethora of things to talk about. There's still things that don't have all the, you have to have so many signatures, don't have all the signatures on them. But I would just encourage you to go to sdsos.gov. Now those ballot initiatives, we don't have any say on those. We can sign the petition or not sign the petition just like you can or cannot do. So my general rule of thumb is I only sign petitions for people, not causes, but that's just me because I'm careful. I try to be careful.
Okay, so what's in the works? Just on the Senate side, these are issues that the legislature is bringing forth. If these ideas pass through the legislature, then they will appear on the ballot for you people to decide. So the Senate alone has proposing to the voters an amendment authorizing the state to impose work requirements on Medicaid recipients. There's one on proposing to the voters the process by which a legislative vacancy is filled. We've already talked about vacancies in District 35 and 34 and 32. Well, this one would allow you people, the voters, all of us, to decide how we want to do that as opposed to letting the governor do that. There's one here on revising, limiting the assessed value of real property and the amount of tax on real property that's coming before the before the people if it gets through the legislature. There's one addressing the right of citizens to bear arms, and that'll be on the ballot if it passes. Restricting the use of, yeah, this one that I brought. That is, if you go out to an airport and you buy gas at an airport for your airplane, the tax that is applied to fuel tax for an airplane is put into a fund to be used by the aviation community. In the past, the people of South Dakota, the legislators and the governor has said, well, there's money in there that I want to use on something else. So I'm just going to take that money that was supposed to be spent on aviation and airports, and we're going to spend it on something else. And this would put that same type of taxation in the same level as the highway funds. In the Constitution, you can't take highway money and spend it on telephones or something else. This would put the same thing in. Now there are 11 opportunities for the voters to make decisions in the next ballot. So, I only got through about half of them.
Okay. One more.
Just so you know, South Dakota was the first state in 1898 to pass in the Constitution referendums and initiated measures. We were the first state in the country to allow this process. Little factoid.
Thank you. Question on House Joint Resolution 5001. What happened to it?
This one has actually been mentioned too. I was the prime sponsor of that in the Senate. This is the one that essentially said we need to get our sales tax back down to 4.0, which is where it was about 3 or 4 years ago. Right now it's at 4.2. It's down from 4.5. And there's a sunset that says in 4 years from now, the sales tax is going to go automatically back to 4.5. This bill died. It died a violent death in the Senate. However, House Bill 1001, simply put, take off the sunset, let the food tax or let the sales tax go back to 4.0, and it died.
Thank you. What is Senate Joint Resolution 501, and what is your position?
Senate Joint Resolution 501. It's a work requirement for able-bodied citizens who wish to receive portions of the expanded Medicaid. It was just discussed, I think, Friday in the Senate. It passed on the floor, and so it will be going over to the House, if I recall correctly. That's what it is. If you're able-bodied recipient of expanded Medicaid, there is a work requirement put into law if the people of South Dakota decide that that's what they want.
Do you remember when this was up for election and the commercial, the farmer on the big tractor saying he had trouble affording insurance? So the message was this would be health care for the working poor. I don't think anyone, when they passed that, understood that we would make South Dakota the only state that would not be able to allow a work requirement if it were allowed by the federal government. So this is a detail that people didn't focus on, and this is what we're asking you at the next election to decide if you want that to be an option if you had potentially a Republican president. And other states were allowed to do this. Right now, we are the only state that would be prohibited from having a work requirement if it were allowed. And if this were the case, it would be many steps down the road. You would have to approve it. We would have to build up the program. But we just didn't focus on this before. We say it's incentivizing work versus incentivizing government delinquency. This is not government dependency. This is not the pregnant woman, the disabled person. This is the working age person, able-bodied, between 15 and 64. And I just want to read this one quote, Teddy Roosevelt, Man in the Arena. If a man stumbles, it is a good thing to help him to his feet. Every one of us needs a helping hand now and then. But if a man lies down, it is a waste of time to try and carry him. And it is a very bad thing for everyone if we make men feel the same reward will come to those who shirk their work and those who do it.
The reason this is coming now, and it came last year, is simply if, in fact, there is a change in the administration, and if, in fact, they do make that requirement an option, because we only meet for 9 weeks at the beginning of the year, we would be, and it'll take some time to stand up a program like this. We'll need some time to put this program together. So what this does is just gives us the right to look at it if, in fact, it ever becomes legal. Not that it will happen, it could happen. I signed on to it last year, I signed on to it this year. I believe in it, so if it does come to fruition, we would be ready to stand up the program and not wait for another year to vote on the issue before starting to stand it up.
Thank you. Question on Senate Bill 53, which appropriates $122 million for water projects. The money goes to the DANR. How will these funds be dispersed, and will West River receive money?
Waterwoman. You know, this is essentially what we tried to do last year. These ARPA dollars have to be appropriated by this December and spent by December of 2026. So we've lost a year, but basically the same process. It pushes all the money to the Department of Ag and Natural Resources to make the decisions on how best to use the water in the state. So it's not political. And basically, they maintain that they're understaffed enough that they will just use existing water projects. Rapid City has a wastewater project and will benefit handsomely from this. But it's money spread across the state. Very exciting. We get another $3.5 million-ish, $2 million some in grant money, and then we have a SWARMS grant where we have to come up with matching money from each community. But that'll get us to the point where we have our study finished. We think it will leapfrog the West Dakota Regional Pipeline from the Missouri all the way west by 2 years. So really big news for Western South Dakota. While we have the momentum, while we have the interest, it could take 20 years to make this happen. So we really have to be forward-thinking now. And every community is being asked across our state on the western side, do you want to be part of this? Think about the future, your future water needs. Sign up now, and let's get this engineered for what our water needs are in western South Dakota so we can ensure that we have drinking water in the future.
Thank you. Next question is, there are several very vague bills, such as Senate Bill 126 or 127. What purposes do these bills serve?
Mike Derby, State Representative. These are what are known as vehicle bills, okay? So the other day we had, these are basically bills that can be used at a later date where information will be dropped into them. The title may even be changed. I, as Chair of Appropriations, I have 2 vehicle bills myself, because you never know what's going to happen as you come down the end of session. I know some people have a heartburn with this thought process because they may or may not end up going through the full committee process if it's at the very end. I understand that, but we have to have a couple of these in our pocket. Mine are titled for the economic health of South Dakota, and the other one is for economic development in South Dakota. Puts like $1 in there, and so we call it a vehicle bill. Thanks.
Thank you. This question is from Burton Sly again. Both my wife and I are 75 and have lived in our home in west of Rapid City since 1993. Last year, our property tax bill increased by 17% from the previous year. This year, our property tax bill increased by 24% from last year. That is over a 40% increase in 2 years. My wife and I did not receive a 40% pay increase in that 2-year period. Will you support legislation to limit any further property tax increases to no more than the consumer price index or the rate of inflation?
Trish Ladner, District 30. I discussed this in my opening comments. SB 167 would revert our property valuations back to 2020, draw a line in the sand. There's no rebates, no refunds. And then from going forward, it'd be capped at a maximum of 3%. And I think if we can reset, we're going to be in good shape, because that person would have realized a 9% increase instead of his 47% increase over the last 3-4 years, or 3 years. 4 years would have been 12%. So I hope I have your support on SB 167 and we can make some noise and get it passed. Thanks.
Thank you. Kind of related question. Property taxes have increased significantly, yet counties are having major funding challenges. What is being done to help counties?
Yeah, and we have some county commissioners here that could answer this much better than I, but we spent the study looking at ways we can ease the burden off counties, not necessarily to hold your property taxes stable, but to really lower the decrease. So much of what counties do is mandated by the government, mandated by the state, that benefits from the sales tax, the growth of our area, but does not give any of that to the county. And may I point out that more than 50% of your property taxes goes to the schools. So that's the biggest recipient of all your property taxes, but we're trying to ease the burden from the county side, and we have all kinds of efforts. The indigent legal services and a quarter of the alcohol tax will be huge if that happens. Also, the veterans service officers, making the state pick up this mandate that they require of 66 counties, maybe regionalizing it, potentially the same for emergency managers. We've just looked at so many different things that Gary would know better than I, but we really are trying to help the counties figure this out. Short of like a sales tax that is across the board, right now if you get a package delivered and you live on the county line, on one side you'd pay the city sales tax, on the other side you pay nothing. And so you can see the difference. When we have all our tourists come, we're a big tourism area. They all come and they get lost in the Badlands or the Black Hills. They have these big car accidents. The county gets nothing to benefit in sales tax from all of these visitors. So I tell people we are laying out the red carpet for the visitors, and yet we don't benefit. Now, the city of Rapid City, the city of Sturgis proper, but look at all those big campgrounds that are just outside of city limits. None of the municipalities that have to deal with all the emergency services that are required in law enforcement benefit. So we do have some things to think about. When it comes to property taxes, there is no simple solution. Everybody says the fairest tax is when you pay and I don't, and that's the problem. Any fix pushes it to somebody else. And then there's the levy, so you can try to limit your valuation, but they're going to get the money on the levy. The fact is, you have to keep it fair. If you try to limit growth and move things back, you got a Prop 13 where you have a very strained system and sometimes really an unfair system. People who live next to you might have a house valued at $400 to $1,000, even if it was the same house as yours, and you could be paying $200,000. And it's not just always the evil person from out of state. What about your children or grandchildren that want to move back to Rapid City? Should they not have a good place to be able to buy a home and not be penalized for buying it 3 years after this rollback? Just some thoughts. Thank you.
I just want to tell the county people that are here that when you brought these proposals, I thought they were fair. You weren't trying to create new burdens on the taxpayers. You were simply trying to move the money from point A to point B on most of those initiatives that you brought, which I thought was fair, like the alcohol tax, moving some of it from the state to the county, where the county is the one picking up the people with DUIs and that burden. So I thought you came with some very innovative ideas. I just wanted to tell you guys thanks for that.
Thank you again. So I served on the summer committee on how to help our counties, 66 counties in the state of South Dakota. How are we going to help them? Because they're facing bankruptcy, because of unfunded mandates by the state placed onto our counties. Veteran service officers is one of those. That's the bill that I sponsored. Simply, it says the state mandates, South Dakota mandates that the counties provide veteran service officers to provide services to the veterans. It's unfunded. The state is saying you must do it, and not only that, but you must pay for it, Mr. County Commissioner. I think that's wrong. I think we need to send the invoice to the proper address. But here's another issue that came up as a result of the summer study. Did you know that the national government or the federal government owns a substantial portion of the state of South Dakota, their acreage in the Black Hills National Forest, national monuments that are not, we can't collect property tax from the federal government. So there's an act in Congress called the Payment in Lieu of Taxes Act. Did you know that the federal government pays the state of South Dakota money in lieu of taxes on the national, on the property that is owned by the national government? Not very many people understand that. Well, when that act was established, there were no wetlands, not a substantial number of wetlands. And so what we've asked is for Congress and for our congressional delegation to put wetland, the acreage, thousands of acres of wetlands that are now in South Dakota, put that into the act as well, so that Congress and so that the feds pay the state of South Dakota dollar bills for property that we can't collect property tax on. That's another unknown effect of the county summer study.
Thank you. We're getting down to the last few minutes here, so if anybody has a question, rush it in. But the next question, in 2023, the state approved $200 million for housing. Do you have any updates on these funds, and what else is being done to help improve housing supply?
Mike Derby, well, I wish I had some better news in regards to that, because that got wrapped around the axle a little bit, and we moved it from GOED to the South Dakota Housing Authority, $200 million. It's low interest loans and grants. Unfortunately, I just heard the other day they haven't started moving the money out to the developers, and now it's almost February. And they're still working on language at this point in time on how they're going to do it. So I'm not very happy with that because we worked on this over 2 years ago, and it's for infrastructure. It's going to help large and small communities. 70% of the 200 million went to cities outside of Rapid City and Sioux Falls. 30% went to Rapid City and Sioux Falls. But I hope I hear some good news soon because I'm not very happy about the delay.
Thank you. We got my last question here. Senate Joint Resolution 503 was replaced by Senate Bill 104. Do you support Senate Bill 104, which looks to be an appropriation to support the Convention of States?
Trish Ladner, District 30. I might as well go out with a bang. I like to quote Glenn Beck in this. First of all, I do not support Convention of States. And Glenn Beck said in an interview, we do not have the moral aptitude at this point in our history as a nation to have Article 5 and open up the Constitution. There are no guardrails to stop a runaway convention. And I feel like we'd be jumping from the frying pan into the fire. So I would not support this.
I concur with what Representative Ladner said. The reality is, if you open up that convention, we have less than 1 million people. We're about the size of a big suburb. We have a very outsized voice in the United States through the Senate. We have a limited voice in the House, but we have an outsized voice in the Senate. If you think about our just in recent history between Daschle and McGovern and Pressler and now Thune, we matter. We have $650 million airplanes that will be parked out here fairly soon. That was the work of, a lot of that work was Senator Thune. Getting that airspace developed, that was Senator Thune. A lot of it, not all of it. But I don't know. I mean, you know, I've talked to my kids about this issue, and they said, you know, one person, one vote, that's it. But they don't live here anymore. You know, they've all moved on. So I'm not a fan that anything would jeopardize the voice of South Dakota. Thank you.
It's the first time that I've ever seen an act and ask of your tax dollars to go to a political action committee, and that's what this is. This Phoenix Correspondence Commission. It's a euphemism. It's a cute name because Constitutional Convention and Convention of States was failing so miserably in the state of South Dakota that they had to come up with a euphemism, something that completely unrelated. Phoenix Correspondence Commission, it's just laughable. Constitutional conventions are dangerous to the way we live in South Dakota and in the United States of America. And now they have the audacity to ask your tax dollars to go to a convention of states where they're going to bring up the Constitution of the United States of America to unelected officials in the hundreds to violate the Constitution, to rewrite the Constitution that you and I are protected every day. Keep that in mind. This Phoenix Correspondence Commission, and you can join me in the back of the room later and laugh with me about that.
So I'm going to ditto everything that's been said. Most of the time when we have Convention of States Day in Pierre, hundreds of people show up. And it's nice to see people engaged in the process. And what they say they want is term limits and to reduce the deficit. That's their big push. And then it makes you look like if you're not for those things, term limits and reducing the deficit, you're evil. However, some of these same people that purport this have been in the legislature for years, term after term after term. So sometimes it seems a little disingenuous to me. Sure, I want the federal deficit to be lower as well. But that's why I elect people to Congress. That's how I tune my vote, is to try to, and they will listen to me. And we are so blessed here in South Dakota that you can actually go talk to Senator Thune, and you can go talk to Senator Rounds, and you can go talk to Congressman Johnson. I think he's at the stock show today. So if you have an issue with this, go talk to him. Because we are so blessed to have this direct contact with our federal people that represent us. But again, if I was California and I was New York and all these bigger states, I would jump on this, because then they could control the whole nation.
And with that, we are out of time for this week's Cracker Barrel. Thank you. Very grateful for legislators for coming and participating today, and very grateful for the attendees, the audience, to submit questions and engage in the legislative process. The next Cracker Barrel, same time, same place.